Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of 30 Plus Click with Max and Yo-Yo. And as always, I am Max and she is.
Yo yo.
Yo-Yo. And of course, we're so excited to welcome you into our studio today. This is our second on camera edition. We want to thank everybody who was so encouraging of us last week when we went on camera for the first time. This is quite new and we're quite excited and to be continuing this with you. On today's episode of the show, we do have quite an interesting rundown for you. We're going to be touching very briefly on the Diddy case that has captured the entire internet this week. We're also going to be discussing the national Ashwebi brought to us, courtesy of Mrs. Oluwemi Tinubu. And finally, we're going to be bringing you updates by IRCC, which was released earlier this week. This is for people who are interested in coming to Canada at any point. And of course, the conversation in immigration will pivot us into our guest in the studio today, which is a very special one for us, someone who is of significance to both of us, and we'll be talking about that much later in the show. So, but without further ado, let's get into it. Now, the Diddy case. Except you've been living under a rock and haven't been on the internet, you probably have heard that Sean Diddy Puff Daddy Diddy Brother Love Combs was indicted this week by the New York justice system on several nefarious crimes or allegations. I want to premise the statement by saying that everything that we discuss here is from an educational standpoint. We weren't there, we do not know, and of course, from the legal standpoint, he is innocent until proven guilty in the court of law. But from some of the things that we've read online, and of course, watching the press conference that was brought to us by the U.S. Attorney earlier this week on CNN, I think I watched that. Some of the charges were ranging from sex trafficking to prostitution to RICO charges. And I hope I haven't mistaken any of the charges, but they were quite a lot. There was domestic violence, bribery, and of course, harassing potential witnesses. And it's just a lot. And so it brought us, the reason why we're bringing this case before us is because at 30 Plus Click, we always have a moment to pause and learn. And I remember this whole situation came about when last year, I think it's now about maybe a year now, I'm not really sure, when the allegations were brought by his then his ex-girlfriend, or who was his girlfriend of 10 years at the time, Cassie. She exposed a number of charges, a number of allegations, some of which we ended up seeing on video. I remember seeing discussions on the internet when people kept on asking, well, if he's so guilty, why did she bring only a civil suit and why not a criminal case at him? And I remember seeing the comments on social media, on Twitter, I would say that someone mentioned that the person, I can't remember the handle now, but the person was quite ahead of the times because the person mentioned that, oh, she probably bought the civil case because it opened the door for the criminal system, for the attorney office to look into much serious charges. And 1 year later, here we are discussing the indictment of Sean Diddy Combs. If you're someone who grew up on hip hop, this is big news. And of course, like everybody on the internet this week, you've probably consumed quite copious amounts of people pontificating, giving their own theories about what happened, what they think happened, what they've always suspected, and all whatnot. But from us on the 30 Plus Clique, I'm just short of words, Yo-Yo. I'm short of words. I know, like, when I shared that news with you, it was like, it's such a dirty allegation, right? How did you feel when reading that?
I took up my time to read and uncover this to know what is actually going on. And so I am not into music. I'm not into the worldly music, but from everything, I always try to learn. And I came up with some very salient points and lessons that I personally took in myself. And so I really don't want you to just, this news does not, there's nothing in it for me. I am not a public figure. I'm not a music star. I am not in America. There's something you can learn. So some of the lessons that personally I want to share from Mr. Combs' current story is this: you must be so sensitive to know when you're manipulated in any form of relationship. And it doesn't have to be a emotional relationship. It can be platonic relationship. It can be a relationship between you and your friends. So, but also know when there is manipulation on the table, because manipulation most times is not uncovered. But if you are not too focused on what is the need for me, what will I gain from this person, what will I start to benefit from this thing, that is when we really blind our eyes to manipulation. But if you're very, very neutral, you'll be able to see whether you're being manipulated. You'll be able to see whether you're being taken advantage of. And so when those little signals start coming up, turn on your antenna. It is time to ask questions. If you cannot ask questions, it is time to seek counsel. Never be too afraid to talk about it, because when you talk about it, you might not be able to know what manipulation looks like, but someone might be able to spot it. I think you're being manipulated, and I think these are the strategies that you can do to navigate a manipulated relationship, Max.
And I think that that is quite a very important point. And I think for me, from my point of view, is I know that a lot of people have pontificated about this whole situation. A lot of people have given advices, thoughts and opinions. A lot of people have said what they thought. But for me, I want to turn the spotlight onto the alleged victims, because I watched the press conference and the U.S. attorney was saying there were plural. And I think there was a case in point when I read some when the Shade Room on Instagram posted some, again, alleged conversations of him and one of the victims, and the person said, I'm not a rag doll. I'm someone's child. And I think that was in relation to so many other things that were conversed, but like that line, I'm not a rag doll, I am someone's child, it really spoke to me and it really stopped me right there in my tracks. And so to the victims of this situation, I do hope that you're okay, or to the alleged victims, I do hope that you're okay. I do hope that you're safe. I do hope that you feel better. And I know that it must not be easy, to be reliving, or as everybody's now having this conversation on the internet, to be rehashing some of probably what was the darkest times of your life. I know this must not be easy, so I encourage you to seek the help that you need to ensure that you're not being triggered or being put back in situations that I hope survived and now are thriving. I am also sorry that you had to go through this. There's no amount of excuse that makes this okay. This should have never happened. Domestic violence in any form of in a relationship is not okay. Talk more of coercion and all of the other alleged things that were being said. So I'm sorry that this was your life, and I'm sorry that this was your story. This is or allegedly your story. But just know that even though it took some time, but we're here now, and I hope that you get the justice that you deserve, because you truly deserve justice, and absolutely nobody deserves to be treated in this way. You're worth more. You're going to go on and have a better life, and hopefully this sends a signal to other people who are engaging in this kind of alleged activity to know that every day might be for the thief, but one day for the owner of the house. And to the young people who are coming up and looking to be successful, I do understand, and I'm actually noticing that there is a level of success that you will reach in life that you start to think that you are higher than the law, or you start to think yourself untouchable. Listen, our people used to say every day for the thief, but one day for the owner. So it doesn't matter how long it takes. If you engage in alleged nefarious activities, one day the curtain will be pulled down and your story will be told. Now, how you want your legacy to be told is left for you to decide. So as we continue to grow in life and we continue to become successful, I do encourage us to walk the straight and narrow. The Bible always tells us that that road is not easy, but it's probably the best for you. And that is where we're going to leave it on this did he do it? Didn't he do it? Did he brother love situation? We will be following the course of this trial. We will be looking forward to seeing how this eventually unfolds in the future.
Before you move on, there is a point I want to bring out. And so there's so many relationships going out there. There's something you need to just pause right now and ask yourself, why am I in it? I can liken this towards a relationship with God. You know, God is sovereign, and sometimes we run to God. Why are you really running to God? Is it what your prayer points? Is it because of what you want to get? Is it because you need divine protection, divine provision? Is that why you're having a very good relationship with God right now? I think you want to pause to think about it. Why am I still with God? And so that Diddy is high up there. He had everything. And so sometimes we are in relationship not because we really want to be here, maybe because of what we stand to benefit, the things that are attached, those underground benefits. So think twice. Why are you in the relationship that you're in right now? Why are you holding on to those multiple strings attached to you? You want to question the why, and that would also help you to know whether that is an healthy relationship, and also that would also help you to know, okay, what is the next step for me? Even if you want to stay in that relationship, navigating the purpose of that relationship would also help you to see things differently.
And of course, it is very, very important to ask what is your why. And even if you don't feel the safety, to get out of a situation that, maybe it's not serving you, always tell people around you, and always, like I said last week, always try and get yourself to safety, and that is, your safety is always paramount. And I'm sure there's several helplines for people who are undergoing domestic violence all over the world. Please reach out for help. It might be delayed, but I promise you it will not be denied. And moving on from that subject, as you can tell, I am today wearing Ankara. It was quite deliberate because we need to now discuss the curious case of the National Unity Fabric brought to us by the First Lady of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, Senator Oluremi Tinubu. Apparently, the situation is that our the First Lady of the Federal Republic of Nigeria went to Zimbabwe. And she saw the Zimbabwe Unity Fabric, and she thought, oh, this was a good idea for us to spread unity in Nigeria, for us to be able to uplift the masses. I read the news by channels. Of course, this is going to be it's going to be value addition to people in the textile industry, because it's going to help them mass produce this fabric. Is going to help people. There was a design competition where somebody, I forget her name now, won about 25 million naira for designing the fabric, and it was all about upliftment and stuff like that. And I say good and well. Thank you, Mrs. Tinubu, for thinking very much of the Nigerian people as the first lady of the nation. You've done well. No, you really done well. You've really thought about what most Nigerians are thinking about in this moment. I mean, when you open the foreign exchange app, and you see that dollar is chasing 2,000, and the Canadian dollar is chasing 1.5, the pounds has pursued, in fact has exceeded 2,000. It doesn't matter, as long as you are able to wear the National Unity Fabric. It's wonderful. I really love that when we thought about things that we could do for our country, and the fact that people are no longer able to eat gala egg that we used to buy for 30 naira is no longer 30 naira, it's chasing 200. Roll on is almost 1,000, if not more. I don't know the prices of these things. One basket of tomato is, in fact, it's no longer 500 as it was the case. It is. If you are still eating Indomie, you are a rich man. Not that I endorse the eating of Indomie or anything like that, but if you are still able to eat Indomie, you're a rich man. One tuber of yam is probably going for an outreach. In fact, bag of rice, almost 100 grand now at this. But we can all wear ashwebi together and look nice and look cute for Independence Day. I don't know. What a wonderful initiative, don't you think?
I have so mixed emotions about this. Whether to smile, whether to frown my face. A part of my brain would say smile. Another part would say why not squeeze. But the truth is, the thing is this: there's so many sides to different stories, and so in as much as it really doesn't add up right now because of the situation of the country, but it is still a celebration when it comes to October 1st. That was when we Nigerians gained our independence. And so it is worth to celebrate. However, the timing is just something that is off because over 80% of Nigerians are not in a good shape right now in Nigeria. And so where would that money come from? Would they be giving that fabric free? And if so, that's good. But would they compel Nigerians after they've worked so hard to earn their little thousands to now bring out money to buy this fabric? Yes, it will add to some economical advancement for some people that are into business. But for the masses, however, so one good thing about it is that it's not compulsory. So if you buy it, she did not put you under any compulsion to buy it. It is your decision. So if you decide to go celebrate on October 1st wearing the fabric, please send pictures. We would like to comment and send our compliments. However, I think it's your decision. You choose to celebrate with the outfit, good job. You decide not to, your decision is so perfect at this time.
For me, I disagree because when you talk about this being an initiative to uplift the country, when you talk about this being an initiative, I'm going to be very blunt and very critical, and I mean all of this very respectfully. Mrs. Tinubu has been in the Senate for 8 years at this point. She was a senator. So I start to ask myself, what is the point of having intelligent, elected, educated leaders when this is the best you can do? This is the best initiative. And yes, you may argue that she is just the first lady. She is not the president, so she probably doesn't have access to policies. But I will raise you one up. I will read to you this. The time and efforts that were spent into putting together this National Fabric Initiative could have been used, and in fact the money, because I'm sure a lot of resources were spent, could have been used to create a micro grant for small and medium scale enterprises in Nigeria to boost their businesses, rather than giving people ashwebi to wear. And ashwebi, for non-Nigerian listeners, ashwebi is a collective uniform that you use to celebrate. Now, a lot of people are not in a good shape. What exactly are we celebrating on Independence Day on October 1st? Since the last 60 years, every year that we celebrate October 1st, we seem to take a step backward. It's not something I used to remember wanting to celebrate it as a kid, but as an adult and seeing how far we slid. Especially this year, when the dollar is doing what it's doing, when the pound is doing what it's doing, when people cannot afford food. Okay, say you give out the fabric for free. Okay, one or two persons mass produce, so one or two persons benefit from this. Of course, the textile industries are going to benefit. Are you going to give us money to sew the fabric? Sewing finko. No, now people are hungry. Let's talk about the waste. I'm just trying to put out some little economic policies that could work for Nigeria. Upcycling, to reduce food waste in the country, upcycling food to ensure that we are able to upcycle what would have otherwise been wasted food in a way that we can put it back on tables of people who most need it at this critical juncture. How about that? How about introducing a circular economy in Nigeria to ensure that nothing goes to waste and everything that we do at this point in our economy is really going through the motion, is putting it back so that even the lowest of the low, the poorest of the poor, are able to gain something from policies. We need to get to the point where we stop doing silly initiative. We need to get to the point in our democracy where we actually put we put policies on the table that has the best good for the greatest number of people. I don't even know how many years we are, so 2024, but however many years we are, we've grown past this childish democracy that we seem to have been practicing for quite some time. And honestly, it's a shame. But anyway, happy Independence Day and happy National Ashwebi Day. Thank you, Oluwemi Tinubu. God bless you. And now we're going to move on to the final segment of trending news from around the world before we get to our guest in the studio. And the final segment is brought to you courtesy of IRCC. And at this point, I'm going to let Yo-Yo take it away because she knows this more than me.
In terms of IRCC, that is the immigration regulation for Canada. If you're trying to immigrate into Canada, that you have different options. You can come in as a visitor just to look at the country to see if this is a country you really want to spend your good number of years in. Then you can do a survey and go back because you have a visitor's visa. Okay, and the second point, you can decide to come in as a student because sometimes the first degree most of us heard was not because it's a place of choice. It's not because that is really what we wanted to do, but that was what was available at that time. And we decided to study biochemistry instead of medicine. We decided to study mass communication instead of law. And so we decided to study so many variations. And so after gaining work experience for about 10 years, 15 years, 7 years, 2 years, and you realize that this is not what I want. I think I need to study, and so I can fit into my purpose, my career that I really want to do. And so if you want to decide to come school or study in Canada, it is an excellent destination for you to choose. However, policies never are static. They are always evolving depending on the economic situation of the country, there's so many factors that determine policies. And so for right now, for the international student route, it is an uncertain route. However, is it still good? Absolutely. Is it a good destination? Yes. Please come and take a course. Come and take a program. You can decide to come to New Brunswick and UMB. You can decide to go to Ontario, Conestoga College. You can decide to go any province and just take your wonderful program, because what you would learn in classroom, you would have the opportunity to practice it. And beyond that, you have the opportunity to meet so many people that have come from different countries. And so your wealth of knowledge in that career field, your wealth of knowledge in that industry will be larger and more than the classroom. And so there's so many ways to immigrate. Like I mentioned earlier, there's another pathway called the permanent residency. So every month, there is always an update. You would hear different updates from different websites. However, if you want to verify the authenticity of the news, please go to IRCC portal and give in some time to read to get the actual update and recent news. Because what might be announced in September, come November, there is also another update coming. So stay tuned, and we will try to bring it up once as we can, but always go back to the government website for recent and authentic news.
And for those of you who might not have been aware, so just some of the recent news that's coming out of IRCC for this week, from this week, is they're going to be starting to put a tighter strain on immigration for student visas starting from 2025, just so that you're aware. I think the figures that is, there's going to be a 50,000 drop in the number of study permits issued in 2025 as compared to what is going to be issued in 2024, and I think there's going to be need for a provincial attestation letter for people who are now studying masters and PhD. There's also going to be a new language requirement for university and college students. This is when you consider the postgraduate work permit. You're now going to require a new language requirement, and I'm not really sure, but I think for college students you need to get at least a 5 on the test, and for university students you need to at least get a 6. Don't quote me on that, so do your research and find out for yourself. And of course, for spousal open work permit, there's now been new restrictions around that. So if this is something that you're looking to come into Canada within 2025, I encourage you to look into it, to do your research. A lot of new policies have come out this week that is definitely shaking up the landscape for what immigration and things are going to look like for international students moving forward. And that brings me to the end of this trending news from around the world. And it's the fact that we ended on in immigration is quite interesting, because that brings us to an interesting pivot. It's quite intentional. With us in the studio to discuss. Oh, I'm blushing because I haven't seen her in quite a while. But with us in the studio is our professor from our days in college. I'm going to let Yo-Yo introduce her because she's just simply fantastic and I wouldn't do her justice enough. So Yo-Yo, take it away.
My dear sister, the one that gives me joy without even thinking about it. Once I see her, all my 32 teeth will just open up, you know. Thank you so much, Kristen, for who you've been to us. Max and Yo-Yo, thank you so much for supporting us. I remember writing at 30 Plus Click and I had a conversation with you. You gave me wings to do this. And so I will never forget how you've supported me in everything I tried to do. There was no time you said, oh, no, I don't think it's a good idea. You always allowed me to explore. And so thank you. And I'm so proud, right, to invite you to our studio today. And so thank you so much, Professor Chris. And thank you for joining us today.
Yes, hello. Thank you. Thank you for having me, Yo-Yo and Max.
Thank you so much, Professor. Professor Kristen was my professor. I think one of my first, in my introduction to Canada, actually, in Canada College. She took us of English, my professor of English. So I'm going to call you professor on this chat because I'm Nigerian and that is what I'm going to do. Like, I cannot call you Kristen. It's not what your status. So thank you so much for joining us today. There's something that comes to mind as people immigrate. It's a journey that people often struggle with. And I remember when I was planning out the show, Yo-Yo talked to me about something that you always say to her, like, softly, take it easy. It takes a step. It's not going to happen for you overnight. And I think, like many people who are immigrating, they have this initiative that is just going to be overnight. It's going to be easy. Of course, the road is tough. You have to give it some time. And I know you immigrated yourself. But can you introduce, we've introduced you. So this is the conversation that we want to have with you today in terms of like taking it easy and writing it out and staying in the trenches or putting in the work. But like, if you want to introduce yourself to the people, let them know a little bit of who Kristen is or Professor is, and then we can take the conversation from there.
A little bit about myself. I actually grew up as a missionary kid. So grew up moving around the world. My parents were missionaries with the Wesleyan Church. And so had a lot of experience with transitioning and sort of between cultures all growing up till I was 14. When I was 14, my parents moved back to the States and settled in Indiana. And I went to high school in Indiana and university in Indiana, where I met my husband, Dwayne, who also is a missionary kid. So he also grew up moving all over the world. So I've always had a soft spot for immigrants and international students. And just that transition that has to happen. We then went on to both work in higher ed. Dwayne, my husband, works in student affairs. I work in the more academic side of things. I run a writing center right now. I manage a writing center at Wilfrid Laurier University. But while we were married, we moved. Oh, goodness. Let's see. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different times before we settled here. So moving and transitioning between cultures and different places has been very, very familiar for me. And I did have to immigrate to Canada. So I married a Canadian, which is a very good way to move to Canada if you're going to do it. But it was still a process. I still had to immigrate, had to go through the permanent residence process, wasn't able to work initially because of that. And then my degree didn't necessarily translate. So I had to get another degree, like so many international students do in Canada. And I think it took me about 7 years before I ended up here where I'm at now, managing the writing center. So it took a while for me to get my feet on the ground again. But in the meantime, I was taking care of our kids. We have 2 kids. I have a 16-year-old daughter named Noelle and a 13-year-old son named Nathan. And I also am a writer, so I was writing as well during that time, studying, taking care of our family. So God has been really good through that transition. But the things that I have learned about transitioning and moving across cultures, and these are numbers that we talk a lot about in the missionary community of people who are who are transitioning into different cultures, it takes about 8 to 12 months for you to make any significant connections in terms of relationships, friendships. So when you move somewhere new, brand new, you're starting over completely. When I moved to Canada, I didn't have any friends here. I didn't have any family here. And it usually takes about 8 to 12 months before you make any significant connections with someone that's going to really, maybe a group of people that really feel like good friends. And then we say it takes about 2 years for you to feel at home. And I would say it takes about 3 years before you're really thriving. And I think that 2 years before you feel at home, especially with the intercultural thing, right? You have to get used to new cultural norms, new languages, jokes, comedy, and different cultures is different. Food is different. And so I think that has been the most helpful for me in my transitions, to just understand it's normal. It's normal for there to be ups and downs in the transitions. It's normal to feel uncomfortable. It's normal for that transition to take time, and God is faithful through that that time and that transition. So yeah, I'd shared a little bit of that with Yo-Yo too. And I think it can be frustrating because, you come to these places and you're a highly qualified, capable, competent person, and you want to hit the ground running. I was a professor in the States and I had been working at writing centers in the States, but my degree, higher ed in Canada, is different than higher ed in the United States, and it didn't quite translate. And so I had to kind of restart my whole career completely over again. And as I said, it took about 7 years before I was back on my feet again. So I don't know if that normalizes the transition a little bit for people, but that's been my insight and my experience.
Thank you so much for sharing your experience and your insight with us. We really, really appreciate that sharing, because sometimes we feel that in terms of settling and in terms of transitioning, there is a particular country or continent that needs to suffer a little bit, but that needs to wait a little bit. But you sharing your own insight is also very important to listeners, and also important to us also doing this as 30plusclique, because everything sometimes is just a process, it's just a journey, and sometimes it's just a phase as well. You need to just give yourself some grace. You need to just take a deep breath right now. If you're in UK, you've left Nigeria to UK, you've come over from India to Canada, you've left Ghana to America, you've left South Africa to Australia, and you're just anywhere in the world right now. Just tell yourself it is okay and you are doing well. Give yourself some grace. This is a process. This is a journey. And when we talk about it together with Max, and you're like, okay, so imagine you in your own country, someone just immigrate from another country and unseats you from your job, and how would you feel? And so that is the same thing. So you need to put forth your best skills. You need to put forth your best food. You just need to also be patient with this process. It is a process. You will be fine. And once you make that decision that you're doing this, forget what it is in Egypt. Right? Not Egypt in the country, but if you're a Bible scholar, you know what I mean. So forget the watermelon, forget the cucumber, and just focus, right? And what can you do to integrate into the system? One tips we're going to be sharing now is networking. Never underestimate the power of networking. Don't just go and keep to yourself, oh, I need to move along with people from this country. Oh, I need to move along with people from this nation. Oh, I need to move along with people from this industry. Network beyond borders. Also, number 2, try to volunteer. Try out your skills. You are very skillful in a certain way, right? Look for opportunities for you to volunteer. So beyond that volunteering, you're also going to meet people, you're also going to network, and these are valuable tips that can help you integrate quickly into any country you find yourself.
Yeah, I agree. And I think for us, finding a church community was really important to connect to while we were here, a place to worship, and then our jobs, and then in our communities as well. I think that's just really wonderful advice, Yo-Yo, to get connected. And then also give yourself space and time to be with people who feel familiar and comfortable. I think as someone who's immigrating, you're often the minority in the room. You're the only person who looks like you, sounds like you, talks like you, and that can be exhausting if it's all the time. It is. It's tiring, and so I think it's okay to every now and then just give yourself a little bit of time if you need to call your friends and family back at home, or if you find other people from similar countries in your new country, from your home country to connect with, and it lets you just kind of relax a little bit. You don't have to always be thinking about, well, how am I coming across, and am I hitting all the cultural cues, and am I understanding everything? So I think it's okay to give yourself permission to look out every now and then, just for those little pockets of familiarity, because it is hard to be in a new country and in a new culture and constantly having to negotiate all of that change and that difference. You'll grow, you'll become vibrant, you'll expand yourself and your capacities more than you ever thought you knew. But it's okay to take care of yourself too. Cook your favorite food from home every now and then. Listen to your favorite music every now and then from home. It's a balance, but and I think that's what Yo-Yo you're saying. Having grace with yourself, I think is really important.
I think earlier this week I was on Twitter, and I read about the story about a young couple that had immigrated from Nigeria to, I want to say the Atlantics, but I cannot be sure of exactly where in the Atlantics, but in Canada. Of course, in the process of transitioning from Nigeria to Canada, they had, of course, sold everything that they had back in Nigeria, essentially started afresh. And then they came here, and all of the things that you're saying happened. It's not been easy. It's not been the way they expected. The jobs are not as much as they used to be because, of course, there was a global inflation. The economy was not where it was. It's not where it was 5 years ago. And of course, there's that homesickness, and you don't know anybody. You're in a new place. You've landed with a young family and kids. And I know that probably this is a situation that relates to somebody who came from Nigeria, but you came from the States as well. So it's a little bit different, but at the same time similar. My question to you was, how were you able to manage your mental health during this very period of uncertainty? Because if we're being honest, that is what it is. You're very uncertain. You don't know where things are going to be from. For this young couple, they're thinking about, do we want to go back? How were you able to stay with it in a way, even when it didn't look like it?
It was hard. The first 2 years here were very difficult for me. And I speak English I don't necessarily have an accent, that people have to, I kind of sound like everyone here. But it was, so I didn't have to overcome some of those challenges that I think immigrants from non-English speaking countries have to overcome when they come to Canada. But even with that, it was hard. Moving is hard. And, it was absolutely the right choice for us to make. God bless that choice for us and our family. And our life has flourished here. But those first 2 years were very, very hard, Max. And my mental health did struggle. The ways that I got through it were I wrote. I have always been a writer. That's a way that I take care of myself. It's a way that I pray. It's a way that I commune with God, but also make sense of the world. So I actually wrote a book during that time, just sort of documenting that season of transition. I also went to a counselor, a therapist, to talk to them and try to process some of the grief I was feeling, because change brings with it chaos and grief. And so it's okay. It's okay to acknowledge that. And I think there's a gift in grief too that God has for us to help us get to the other side of healing. And then our church was a big part of that, having a church family and community to rely on. And then I also I had for years already been taking some anti-anxiety medication, and my doctor did help to boost that dose a little bit for those. I think the 6-month mark was really the toughest mark, because at about 6 months, all the excitement and shine of the move has worn off. And at 6 months, you're really starting to get into the trenches of like, oh, here's where I am. Here's where I've landed. Here are the realities of what the job market is or what things are. And so that helped for a little bit too. So it is important. And I think what I want your listeners to really take away is there's nothing wrong with you if you're struggling. It doesn't mean you're weak. It doesn't mean that you're not doing the right thing for your life. Doesn't mean it wasn't the right choice. It is a natural part of transition, to grieve, for it to be difficult and uncomfortable at first. And there's no panacea for it but time. You just have to live through it and take care of yourself and pay attention, give yourself the space, tend to your mental health, like you were saying, Max. Use those resources, networks, and things to buoy yourself up. Don't get into this single mindset of like, I've just got to like be stronger and get over it. Don't isolate yourself through it.
Well, Professor, I couldn't have said it better myself. And as you were speaking, I remember my first few months in Canada. You know, like you said earlier, you leave your country as a professional, a very competent professional. And I found myself working retail for the first time in my life. It was hard. It was so hard. And then we're having to do that dredging snow, you know, walking through dredging. It's so cold. You know, I remember those mornings when I'd have an early morning shift and it's so cold and it was so hard. Prior to now, I used to have a different YouTube channel. And I always thought when I came, I was going to continue with my friend and we were going to keep doing it. But then I landed and I said, no, YouTube is not it's not the primary priority for this time. I had to go through that season of it being hard. And then to get to this place where I can now get back on camera to do this 30plusclique with Max and Yo-Yo is quite something. So if you had told me then, when I was going through that very first 2 years of it, that I would ever come back and be doing this, I probably would have said no. Like, I had more difficult things going on, more real things going on in my life at the time. But we made it through. We stuck with it. We assimilated, and here we are just a few short years later, and now we're doing a show where other people can learn from what we've learned. It's not easy, but it's worth it. I don't know if you have anything to say, Yo-Yo.
Well, like you said, it is really worth it. So if you're stuck right now, you just arrived maybe 6 months ago, you're still taking all the beautiful pictures. Good job. And if you're done taking all the pictures and you're asking yourself, where am I? What is going on? And if you're done with school, you just graduated and you're looking for a job, you've done like 200 resume and nothing is coming forth, please relax, right? Give yourself grace. I met a student 2 weeks ago, and the student just wanted to jump from the managerial job in Nigeria and just wanted to jump into another managerial job in Canada. I was like, wow, I love that ambition. It is good, but keep it in one part of your heart. And just at least when you're done with school, you can bring it up, because you might not most likely get a managerial job for part-time hours, because as a student, you're only allowed to work for 20 hours. And so, would you be managing for 20 hours? So I'm not saying it's not possible. It's possible, but just be real. So wherever you are right now in any of your immigration journey or pathway, just be real. The one thing you want to do to yourself is to deceive yourself. And when you're going to LinkedIn, you're going to Indeed to apply for a job, are you really deceiving yourself with the job title that you're applying for? What can you start with? You just need to start and grow. I remember coming to Canada. I had to take off 7 years of my resume because I needed to just work. And after applying for so many jobs with my job title back in Nigeria, I wasn't getting anything. I was like, you know what? Yes, rank it up. I took it off and I got my first job in Canada. Devise a means, but just start. And one good thing in Canada is whatever you've done, they value the experience, and those skills are very transferable. They just want to know that you've started. So start with something, earn some money, put food on your table, And so that you can think clearly and know where you could transfer those Canadian skills and top it up with your national experience or competencies that you're bringing from your own country. Put these two combinations and you see you're going to get to your desired dream. And so that is tips number 3 or number 4. And so we're just sharing our stories. We are all immigrants here, technically. But so we're just giving tips and sharing our beautiful stories and where we are, and we're still going places. We've not arrived yet.
I worked retail for the first 2 years for free because I couldn't get paid because I was having to go through the permanent resident. So when you come in as a student, you can work, but when you come in as a spouse married to a Canadian, you have to go through the permanent residence. You can't get paid to work. And so, I went from being a professor in the States and working in a writing center. And my boss, right before we left to come to Canada, offered me the job to be the director of the writing center there in the States. And I had to say no because we were moving to Canada. And the reason why we came to Canada is because we believed that we would be able to provide a better life for our children and our whole family here. And I think that's the other thing you have to keep in mind is you're coming here for the future. You're coming here for your children. And so you will have to make those sacrifices at first. You won't be able to just jump. I mean, by, a miracle maybe, but to jump from a manager to a manager position. But you have to keep your eye on the prize for the goal. Like, we knew this place would be better for our children. We knew it would be better for us as a family. And so I worked retail for free for 2 years until I got my permanent residence. And then I worked part-time teaching classes I'd never taught before. And then I went back to school. And then finally, 7 years in, I was, a manager again, back to where I had been in 2015 when we moved here. So I think, all of that is really right. It's just a part of the process. And I think you just have to kind of humble yourself and realize there's always, I love Yo-Yo's attitude. There's always room to grow. There's always room to learn. There's always things I can learn again in different spaces and different jobs. So it does pay off. It does all come full circle again. You just have to put in the time and give yourself the time to make that transition.
Oh, thank you so much, Professor, for saying that, because again, I know that we're speaking about this in the context of people who are in Canada, but I promise that this is not just an isolated incident, whether you be in Canada, in the UK, the US, Germany, or Europe, wherever you ended up migrating to. I'm sure that it is most likely the same for you. You take the time you need. Start, going from having a high level professional work, like Professor Kirsten just said, being a manager to working unpaid. It might look like a trend backward, but when you remember why you started, all of this, I'm almost getting to thinking about a scripture in my mind, but I don't want to quote it because this has been so scripture heavy today. But I'm like, it's always, you just press on. You look not on things that are behind, just press on. And when you remember your why, stay strong in your why. It's not easy, especially if you're like us who came from a Sahara desert. It's hot, and then suddenly it's cold. It's always cold. You're having to adapt. It's even when I came here that I understood that there was something called seasonal depression. Thankfully I haven't had it yet, but I can see the impact of seasonal depression on people. You have to learn how to navigate people when they're undergoing the very seasonal depression. It takes time, even learning your environment. So to all the people who are out there thinking about immigrating, if you can, do it, but understand what is your why. But before going to any countries anyway, I would always ask you to research, because I find that one of the things that a lot of people are doing wrong is following the herd mentality. Canada is the popping place to immigrate to, or by 2025 it won't be actually, but like Canada is the popping place to go to, and so a lot of people are just following the herd mentality and going to Canada, and without doing their proper research. What is the country like? What is the economy like? What are the people like? What is the environment like? And so when you come here, you get shocked. So if you're going to, if you know what you want, if you understand your why, this is my, I think the fourth or the fifth tip, I don't know where we are, Yo-Yo. You know, if you understand your why, you understand what you want to do, you research about the countries of the world, there's so many of them, and then you figure out the one that works for your why, and you go there, you stay with it, you persist, you know, and you hang in there, give it some time, give yourself grace. This is something that I learned in Canada. The term give yourself grace is the Canadian term that I've learned, you know. So like, give yourself grace and it's all going to be worth it. And I'm going to let you have the last word.
Well, my last word is going to be pray. Have a solid relationship with God and always talk to Him. It is one way to just let it go. I remember during one of those winter days, I looked up, I looked down, I looked left, I looked right. There was nothing to do other than to cry while walking under the snow. I did that at the end of the day. After crying, I started praying. After praying, I think I felt better. So don't remove that part of communication with God. And so, you know, I don't know. So that communication, you cannot explain what it does, but I think I want to give this to Professor Kristen. And what we did not tell you is that Professor Kristen is a pastor. And so I think she'll be able to explain this portion for us.
About praying?
Yeah, and communicating with God.
Oh, I mean, it's the life source. It's your life source. It's what helps you get through this whole transition, is knowing that He has good plans. You know, we know that He has good plans for us, and that as long as we are faithful and submitting our hearts and our lives to Him, that He will work everything together for our good, for His glory. And I think just staying in touch with Him and staying connected to Him, that's the only way I was able to get through all of this. I remember one of the images that came to me in those early 2 years when I was really struggling, was I just felt like I was sitting in the shadow all the time. And I just remember saying to God, like, you know, why are you allowing this? Why are you allowing me to feel so sort of abandoned and sort of alone and grieving in this time? I just feel like I'm sitting in your shadow rather than looking at the sun, like the light of your face. I feel like I'm in your shadow, God. And I just remember so clearly the Holy Spirit said to me, but there wouldn't be a shadow if I wasn't here. And that sense of like, I was sitting right next to God and I was sitting under His shadow, that He was covering me even in that way, and even in that space was a beautiful encouragement to me. So I think that is our life source. That's what keeps us focused every day. And when you can't do anything else, like Yo-Yo said, when you look up and you look down, look around, all you see is snow and gray skies, you need to pray. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Professor Kristen, for joining us today. And we're going to be wrapping this session. We've said a lot in this episode because we decided to keep saying a lot, and so that we have different sides to our 30plusclique episode every time we upload. So thank you for all the comments. Thank you for all the likes. Thank you for all the sharing. We love you. We cannot be here without your support. And so I want to encourage you, if you've been inspired, motivated in any way, leave us a comment. We love to communicate with you. We love to read your notes. We pick everything and we appreciate you. So please subscribe to our channel, share with us your other friends, and we love you. Have a wonderful week.
Bye.